There you go.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. As you just heard, we'll be recording the meeting here this afternoon, so I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. There are two primary reasons for that. One is it's very helpful for us in trying to make sure we capture what everyone has shared with us here this afternoon. So recording the meeting is helpful for us in that regard. And recording the meeting is also helpful for anyone who may not be able to join in person today and may want to hear our conversation here today. So for that reason, we'll be recording the meeting this afternoon. Just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. Again, good afternoon. Thanks for joining. My name is John Fisher. I'm our Deputy Division Director of Solid Waste at MassDEP. And I've been leading our work on food waste reduction in Massachusetts since 2012 in particular. So I want to start by thanking everyone for taking the time to join us here today. I know everyone's busy with your day-to-day work responsibilities, so I appreciate everyone taking time out from your day to join the discussion here, and hope we'll have a chance to hear from all of you over the course of the meeting or following the meeting. We are, as I'll explain in a moment, we're at a bit of a transition point with our food waste reduction programs in Massachusetts, a really important and significant transition point. And as we go through program changes like this, it's really important that we get broad stakeholder participation and input into what we're doing so that the programs and policies that we develop and carry forward reflect everyone's input and perspectives, questions, and concerns. So discussions like this one today and others to follow are really important to ensuring that we develop the most effective programs and policies that we can to move forward with reducing food waste in Massachusetts. So just start with that note of thanks and appreciation to everyone for joining us here today. And we'll be having several discussions like this along the way. This is not the first and not the last. So I hope you'll stick with us through this process because we have a lot to talk about and a lot of decisions to think about here. So what we're going to be talking about here today, I'm going to be dividing my slides into three primary components. So the first section, a good chunk of the slides will be background. I want to make sure that everyone understands where we're coming from, what's happened so far in Massachusetts, and I want to share some updates about progress and programs that we've implemented to date. What I'll be doing is I'll be going through that entire section, and then I will pause for questions, comments, and Q&A after that section. And I'll take the same approach for the next two sections. I have just a couple slides kind of setting the transition to talking about where we've been and then the transition to where we're going. And we'll again pause for questions after that. And then the real meat that we want to get here today is a potential proposed approach that we've been thinking about for how we move forward from here. So once again, I'll be going through those slides as a section and then having discussion and Q&A for everything that I've shared. And I'll explain more about that and put it into context once we get to that point. So Rob, be able to see me advancing here, the background?
Yep, you're on the background slide now.
Okay, just want to confirm that. Thank you. Okay. So just to set the context, this information is probably not new to anyone who's been working on food waste reduction in Massachusetts or outside of Massachusetts. But a number of us were at the Northeast Recycling Council conference yesterday, the past couple of days, and there were some really good presentations, and some of this data was shared. And I just thought it was important to grab a couple of these points just to remind ourselves of the broader context that we're working within. First couple of points here come from a presentation from REFED, which is a national group working on food waste reduction and do a lot of work around program data and information. So they shared these first 2 points that nationally 31% of our food goes uneaten. And probably a lot of folks have seen that or similar numbers cited along the way. And then on average, we each spend nearly $800 per person per year on food that doesn't get eaten. So I think that's really important because what we're talking about is not just an environmental issue, but it's a resource issue and it's an economic issue. It's also a social issue. So there's a lot to the food waste problem in Massachusetts. We're also faced by a kind of twin dynamic here that always strikes me as a little bit tragic, honestly, that we dispose of about 900,000 tons of food waste in the trash each year. And at the same time, about 1 in 6 Massachusetts residents are food insecure, which is kind of a really ironic pair of problems to have and just highlights the importance of the resource that we're talking about here. So in Massachusetts, as I mentioned, food waste, it's the largest chunk of our solid waste. It represents just over 20% of our trash. And each year we dispose a little over 930,000 tons of food material in the trash each year. And that's despite a lot of progress, which I'll share in a moment. So despite the progress we've made, we're still disposing of more than 900,000 tons per year in the trash. We estimate roughly, and there's some uncertainty to these estimates, so there's a margin of error here, but roughly about 500,000 tons of that being from commercial entities and a little over 400,000 tons of that being from residential entities. Again, there's some, uncertainty there depending on what's called residential and commercial in the world of solid waste management. But I think the bottom line there is there are still significant amounts from both commercial and residential sources. We are going to get updated waste characterization data that's going to be coming into us early next year, and we should be able to share that out by next spring, and that will maybe shine a light on updated solid waste disposal data. So we'll be interested to see what that shows. But the fact that we still have a lot of food waste in the trash and it's coming from both businesses and residents, we don't expect that data to change. We do have a goal within our solid waste master plan to increase our annual diversion of food material from the trash, or to reduce the disposal of food material in the trash by 500,000 tons additional on an annual basis by 2030, and that's over 2018 baseline where we were at 280,000 tons. So that would get us to 780,000 tons total, and I'll show the year-by-year progression more in a moment, but our most recent data shows us at about 350,000 tons through 2024. So a little under halfway there towards our goal, and some great progress to date, but also a long way to go to work towards our 2030 goal. Okay, so when we think about the waste disposal ban, and for anyone who's not familiar with the waste disposal ban, I'll provide some more context around that in a moment. But we had a pair of bans that went into place for commercial food material, one in 2014 and an expansion in 2022. And the program analysis we did around the development of those bans suggested to us that we could go from about 100,000 tons from our kind of baseline estimate of food waste diversion prior to the 2014 ban to about 300,000 tons per year as a result of the 2014 ban. And that's happened. And then we estimated that the 2022 ban would bring in about another 100,000 tons of additional food material per year that we could potentially capture. And then the remainder would need to come from other sources, and essentially smaller sources, either smaller business generators or residential food material. I'm going to talk more about our management capacity in a moment, but we're at the neighborhood of 500,000 tons per year of management capacity. There's some flux in that number and some uncertainty in that number, which I'll explain more in a moment. We have a combination of some capacity that's not fully utilized, and then we also have a need for more capacity, more distributed capacity, as well as additional collection infrastructure. And again, I'll talk more about that in a moment. Just another dynamic I'll highlight is Now, all of the New England states have food waste disposal bans in some shape or form, and we do see growing infrastructure in states around us. So we see an increasingly regional interstate capacity picture, which is really a good thing for Massachusetts as well as for the region. So again, a little bit of background about how we got to this point. For those who don't know, waste disposal bans in Massachusetts date all the way back to the early 90s. So they've been around a long time, started for materials like paper, cardboard, bottles and cans, leaves and yard waste, and grew with the addition of a number of materials over time. In 2012, we started working in earnest on a food waste disposal ban. We met with a lot of folks through this group and other discussions. Developed what we called an organics action plan. It's been updated a number of times since, but that laid the groundwork for our initial food waste disposal ban that took effect in late 2014. After a number of years of implementing that waste ban, we made the decision to move forward with an expansion to that ban, and we took the initial waste ban that had a 1 ton per week threshold and lowered that threshold to a 0.5 ton per week effective November of 2022. Around the same time, we published our final 2030 solid waste master plan. And as part of that master plan, we made a commitment to do a mid-course review to our solid waste master plan to review our programs and policies. And as part of that, we made a particular commitment to conduct a stakeholder process by 2025, and here we are. To assess whether to ban all organic waste from disposal by 2030. So we've been giving this a lot of thought this year. We had a couple of organic subcommittee meetings earlier in the year. And this is the point where we're really first presenting a proposed approach for how we think that might work, which, again, I'm going to get to in a few minutes here. So annual food waste diversion. So there's a lot of numbers on this slide, and I'm not going to go over all of them, but you can see the trend here. Going back to 2016, when we first started gathering comprehensive data about food waste diversion in Massachusetts. And you can see going up to 2024. Again, not trying to go over all the numbers on the slide, but a couple things to highlight. We've seen a really good growth in overall food waste diversion. That's the bottom row of the chart. But you'll notice that it's leveled off a little bit in the past couple of years. So you can see the totals 22, 23, and 24. At 340,000, 370,000, 350,000. So kind of a plateau there in terms of our total statewide diversion. Overall, you can see a real significant growth in anaerobic digestion, that top row there going from the left-hand side to the right. That's really been where the substantial growth has happened with our food waste diversion in Massachusetts. Now that may not be the case going forward, but that's been the pattern over the course of the past 8 years or so here. Okay, another really important data point and little different numbers here is the number of customers that are contracting for separate food waste hauling. When we say organics here, this is really food waste in particular. So again, you see the real significant growth going all the way back to 2014, and then an interesting spike in 2024. So this is data that's gathered by our Recycling Works Massachusetts program. It's gathered from food waste haulers, and they do go to great pains to ensure that this data is accurate, that it's not double counting, and that it's not missing any significant data. So really interesting kind of combination of data points here between this number for 2024 in particular and these numbers for 2024. So a little bit different. So we're seeing a little bit of a drop off in the overall food waste diversion that we're seeing at the same time as we've seen a reported growth in the number of customers. Now, maybe there's an issue with one or both of those data points to some degree. Maybe we're missing some food waste diversion in our facility reporting. But again, we've gone to great pains to try to ensure that we're capturing at least all of the significant entities that are taking significant amounts of food material. And again, with this food waste hauler data, really work to make sure it's consistent and as accurate as possible. So an interesting data point, both showing, really good progress through the years, but interesting just divergence between the two in 2024. I don't have, a real clear answer for that myself. I think it's an interesting divergence, not sure 100% what it means. Another interesting data point, smaller numbers, but really important numbers. I'm pretty confident these are significantly understated. This is data from companies that sell and service and implement food waste tracking and prevention systems to businesses and institutions in Massachusetts. And it shows the number of customers that they're serving year by year, shows the new annual food waste prevented, and then presuming that prior year diversion doesn't, or reduction doesn't backslide, shows kind of a cumulative year by year total in food waste prevention. Again, quite confident that this is missing a lot of food waste prevention activities that occur that don't happen through one of these systems that tracks food waste prevention. But some really not insignificant numbers here, and numbers where we believe there's opportunity to continue to significantly grow these food waste prevention activities. And when we start thinking about management capacity needs and food waste reduction goals, we need to be really mindful that we're not forgetting about the potential that food waste prevention has in the system. And that holds true for both businesses and institutions, as well as wasted food from residents. So I just want to really highlight the prevention data and opportunities that we need to keep in mind as we move forward here. Okay, a couple words about inspections, enforcement, and compliance. I'm going to kind of pick up my pace a little bit here because I want to make sure I allocate plenty of time for discussions and Q&A, and if I don't cover something adequately, we can cover it in the discussions and Q&A. But a couple points, take-home points about this slide. If you don't know, we conduct wastepan inspections for food waste, as well as all of our wastepan materials at the point of disposal. So that can be a solid waste transfer station, a waste-to-energy facility, or a landfill. We work back from there to identify the source of significant amounts of banned material, including commercial organic material, and then we issue enforcement. Most often to the generator where that material came from, the business or institution. Sometimes to a waste hauler where the hauler has taken a load that was separated and mistakenly delivered that for disposal. Through the years, these not entirely up to date, so these numbers have increased slightly, but we've issued about 130 notices of non-compliance. That's what we issue for a first violation, and then consent orders with penalties. Our enforcement approach for a repeat violation from the same entity. And we are looking, and we've always been looking to try to increase our inspections and the resulting compliance and enforcement activities as we go. We do have 2 new inspectors starting this month. We also issue warning letters, which may be based on more marginal load observations that we see. They may be based on facility data, third-party data, or other data reported to or shared with us. And then we've also been sending some targeted requests for information letters to businesses that we believe may generate enough food waste to need to comply with food waste disposal ban. These are formal in the sense that they require a response. We actually do take enforcement if a company does not respond to us. And we've seen some interesting responses. So I just want to highlight here, we've sent to about 60 companies thus far. I think that, again, that number's increased a little bit since this slide, but those companies represent about 900 locations in Massachusetts, a lot of companies with multiple locations, and we're kind of working our way down as we go. So interesting data. Some organizations report to us that at least they believe they're under the half-ton per week threshold, but about a third of them said they're planning to put programs in place anyway. A number reported that they are over the threshold. Most of those saying they do have programs in place to comply. About a third of them saying they're planning or implementing programs to comply, and we're going to be checking back with those entities as we go. And, as we send out more information requests, we're always in a mode of waiting for responses from them. But I think this is a really important addition to our compliance strategy. This slide could be a whole presentation in itself, but we have really significant program assistance delivered through our Recycling Works in Massachusetts program, which we fully fund, is delivered under contract to us by the Center for Ecotechnology. And we delivered a lot of grants to support our food waste reduction infrastructure, as well as loans to support that infrastructure. And this includes grants and loans to both facilities that receive food material, whether that may be donation or rescue or composting, anaerobic digestion or animal feed, as well as for the collection of materials. So we've been very active with grants and loans for our food waste reduction infrastructure, and we fully expect that to continue going forward. We're certainly, as I alluded to, we don't have all the infrastructure we're going to need, and we want to continue to invest in that infrastructure. So management capacity. So these numbers are somewhat rough numbers. Some are a little bit overstated, I believe. Some are a little bit understated, I believe, and I'll kind of explain each of them briefly. The anaerobic digestion capacity, about 360,000 tons per year, a little bit underutilized, which I'll show you in a moment. Composting, this number is kind of a reflection of what compost operations could take based on approvals, but likely not what they could take from an operational perspective. Most are, operating at a much smaller scale than that. And while there's some room for growth, this 90,000 tons is a little bit overstated. On the other hand, there are a lot of operations that potentially could take food material within their permits, but aren't really reflected in this number. So there's just some, kind of differences in uncertainty between kind of a permitted and approved capacity for compost operations versus a true operational capacity. And the operational capacity right now is significantly lower than that number. Animal feed, this, on the other hand, I believe is an understated number. I believe there's animal feed operations take significantly more than this, but it's a difficult number for us to get reported. Donation and rescue, this is kind of a reflection of kind of what's been happening. Donation and rescue, we don't permit these, so there's not like a defined capacity number. In kind of informal discussions, it does appear there's room for those organizations to take more within their current operational capacity, and then certainly room for that operational capacity to grow through additional capital infusion, capital investment. So if you add those numbers up, and again, there's some give and take in some of these numbers, get in a neighborhood of 500,000 tons of capacity. This does not include any out-of-state facilities, some of which, do accept some significant amounts of food material from Massachusetts, but this is just reflecting what's in Massachusetts. So, what that shows is a gap, again, roughly about 160,000 tons between our current diversion level and potential estimated capacity. A lot of that is among current anaerobic digestion facilities. Smaller amount of, potential capacity, potential additional capacity of compost operations. Again, there's a difference between what those operations are potentially allowed to take and what they're really positioned to take right now. Animal feed, again, I think those numbers have consistently been understated in terms of what farms may accept for animal feed. And food donation and rescue, a little bit of a softer number, but definitely a need and definitely an opportunity to grow food donation and rescue more. And like food waste prevention, one of our most cost-effective and really highly beneficial strategies for reducing food waste. I do not have a copy of the EPA food waste scale, in my slides here today, but of course, preventing food waste and then donating food are right at the top of that scale. So we want to be very, mindful and doing whatever we can to grow those aspects of our capacity and how we manage this material. Again, 2030 goal, 780,000 tons of additional food diversion. So whatever you think about that 500,000 ton capacity estimate, we're going to need more to get to our 2030 goal. And in particular, what we're really going to need is more distributed capacity to reduce transportation distance and make collection from smaller sources more cost effective. And that's going to be particularly true in kind of the eastern third, eastern half of the state geographically, as we look to capture more food waste from smaller businesses and residents, building out that collection infrastructure, shortening transportation haul distances is going to be really important for the cost effectiveness. Okay, almost to the end of the section, and then we're going to pause for some questions, discussion, and Q&A. But I want to take a moment to note that there's been a lot of really significant activity going on with cities and towns, setting up a variety of different approaches to collect food scraps from their residents. This has been a mix of drop-off programs, curbside collection programs, combinations of the two, as well as programs where the municipality is not actually running the program, but they define and work with a preferred vendor to provide food waste collection services for their residents. And of course, a lot of municipalities for quite some time have been distributing subsidized home compost bins to residents. In 2024, this doesn't include the home compost bins, but those programs collected about 22,000 tons of material, not a huge amount in terms of our statewide management, but a rapidly growing amount as we see new programs being set up every year. And then we do work quite a bit with programs through schools. I'm going to say more about this in a moment, because schools are a really important sector going forward. But we have, through our Green Team program, we've distributed a lot of equipment to schools to support small on-site composting programs. Among other things, we've also delivered assistance to schools through our Recycling Works program. We have a very active green sword work group focused on recycling and composting issues for schools. So that is a lot of background that I've tried to go through quickly. And I want to pause now and take some time for questions, comments, or discussion on any of that information. And as appropriate, I'm happy to bounce back to any particular slides if we need to hone in on anything in particular. So with that, Rob, if you want to kind of tee these up for me here.
Sure. So first we have a question from Kendall Christensen, and then we'll go to you, Phil. See your hand up. So Kendall's question was, food waste processed via AD is generally pre-slurried offsite and then delivered as a slurry. At what point is the tonnage measured? Is it pre-slurried food waste or when delivered to AD?
Okay. So that, let's see, so that varies a little bit. Where there is, for the most part, it's being measured at the AD facility. How that material is being collected, I don't have precise data on the breakdown. Some of it is liquid pumpable food material to begin with, coming from, say, a food manufacturer. Some of it may be slurried on site. Some of it may be ground up on site at a digester unit. If it is going through a slurrying operation that sends to anaerobic digestion facilities that we receive reports from, which would be the case for, like, say, the Vanguard Agawam facility, we don't count reported data from that facility because it's reflected in our anaerobic digester facility reports. On the other hand, a little bit different model is material from the Waste Management Core facility is being primarily diverted to the Greater Lawrence Sanitary District in Andover. That data we actually count going through the core facility. So it varies a little bit. The point at which we count, we're always striving to count completely, but not double count material at two facilities.
And probably move on to Phil next.
Good afternoon, everyone. Phil Goddard, town of Bourne. A couple of things, and I'll just shoot these out very quickly so you have them for your planning. There is a sector that I think you're probably tracking, but in case you're not, and it really ends up at these DPAC facilities, is the DPAC, like off-spec food waste, stuff from spoilage. It's an important sector and it's usually highly contaminated and can't go to a compost site. So I think that should be encouraged for anaerobic digestion because it's really what makes the most sense to have staff, labor try to pull apart stuff. It's very difficult, and especially in urban areas. A note that I mentioned last time, you mentioned in 2016, your data showed 80,000 tons a year of compost site capacity, and now it's down to 21,000. And I asked, and it's extremely difficult to site, even with the site assignment designations, or you don't need a site assignment, just physically finding a spot to do it that's acceptable to a community to prevent odors, vectors, et cetera. It's a real challenge. And we're not California. We don't have Napa Valley, San Francisco with, large spaces in Eastern Mass. We're working very diligently on the Cape with the county, and communities on the Cape are looking to build something on the military base when they divest land. We have a parcel identified, thankfully. But it's taken many years of work. And I would just note that the more the DEP can assist those types of operations, I see Andrew and his team here that we work with Black Earth and others here. It's very difficult to finance and operate these facilities and site them. So anything that DEP can do to find locations within the portfolio of DCAM or state property or military bases that are isolated and that are affordable and you can put them out to bid, that'd be helpful. On an operations perspective, I think DP can do other things you have to think like a developer. So imagine you were going to do this, the state were going to build a facility, go through the permitting process, public outreach, but also selling the product. I think DP could encourage the legislature to pass a bill to ban the plastic labels on produce, which have PFAS in them, their contamination, something like that. Also, they could, clarification on PFAS liability in concerns. There was a facility out in Western Mass. I think they got a notice of non-compliance, and there were drinking water wells, and it was an old paper mill site. You know the story I'm talking about. So these are things that would kill projects. And the last thing I'll say is that really the state again needs to be leading by example with, say, for example, DCAM, that's Division of Capital Assets Management and Maintenance, as well as DOT, to use compost products that may be in surplus that are beyond what a town can use. So, for example, I see my great colleague and friend here, Maria Leva, that I've known many years. We have a little DOT project you might have heard of down in Bourne, about $4 billion worth of capital infrastructure. DOT should really be consuming vast amounts of organic matter for the roads and the medians and such, and that really should go out for a state contract at some point to help the businesses that you want to see come online and create local capacity. So those are suggestions I think you should really work in. And again, if I could say anything that sums it all up is think like you're a hauler in downtown Boston. Where are you going to go? How are you going to get it out of the city? How contaminated it is, and think like a developer if you wanted to produce it. Because I remember the master plan from 10 years ago, or maybe longer, when this all went down. UMass was considered as a site for an anaerobic digester, and it failed for a variety of reasons with state legislature issues. So, but you need to flip that around and start thinking like, well, maybe you need to revisit that, overcome that with the legislature, and really help out because you're asking the private sector to pick up the slack here with maybe some municipalities. So I'll stop now. I've said enough, but those are I get to really get pragmatic now because it's going to get harder and harder to find places to do these things. So thank you for listening.
Hi,
Um,
can I go next?
Sure, unless John had anything
Okay,
to add.
all right. Good to see you, Phil. I'm Maria Oliva with the Cape Cod Canal Region Chamber located in Bourne. I just want to know, how are businesses and residents impacted? And do they need to be doing anything, to help out?
Yeah, so far, we're going to be talking more about this in a little bit, but so far the businesses that are required to comply are those that generate 1/2 ton or more of food material per week. We estimate statewide that's roughly about 4,000 entities. Coincidentally, the hauler data we have shows about just over 4,000 entities diverted. That's not necessarily a one-to-one, the same 4,000, but we feel that compliance has been pretty good with a 1/2 ton per week ban. I do think there are businesses subject to the 1/2 ton per week threshold that do not have food waste separation programs in place yet. And we're kind of looking to further improve that compliance going forward. But overall, I think it's been pretty good. Residents do not have obligations under the food waste disposal ban. Municipal programs vary. Some are townwide programs. Some are opt-in programs where residents choose to participate. Sometimes that carries a fee to the resident. Sometimes the municipality covers the fee. So it varies town by town. But those programs from a residential participation standpoint are all voluntary. And I don't know if I said this earlier, but just on all of our waste ban compliance and enforcement work, that's all directed to businesses, institutions, or government entities. We don't ever issue waste ban enforcement to an individual. That's not kind of an appropriate use of a waste ban enforcement tool. So everything we do with waste ban compliance and enforcement is directed to businesses, institutions, or government entities.
Thank you.
So next we have Mark, and then afterwards, I think Andrew, you have your hand up.
Thank you. I imagine I'll have more questions after the transition to action plan section of this meeting. But I was curious to know if if any data was being collected on intentional food waste destruction by either producers or distributors. And I was wondering if how much of that was or how much of the food waste that is actually being received comes from that sort of activity in order to maintain sort of a certain price point.
Intentional destruction, do you mean like recalls, past date product, things like that? What did you have in mind there?
I mean, I think a good example of this actually comes from the Great Depression when dairy producers would just pour milk out onto the side of the road. I think a more recent example of this was there was a bunch of French winemakers destroyed I think hundreds of thousands of gallons of wine because they'd all accidentally produced too much of it, and it would have lowered the prices of it. So that's more kind of what I'm thinking along, because I think that may be a kind of significant food waste section.
Yeah, so we don't necessarily get data or reporting on that. One thing to note for folks who don't know this, there is no unless we send a formal request for information letter to a business, there's no generator reporting requirement under the waste bans. But there's a couple areas where we get information along these lines. So one is Phil mentioned, depackaging operations often get loads of packaged material in cases like this. That can happen for a variety of reasons. It could be damaged during transportation. It can be past date. It can have a product recall. It may be a product labeling issue. Those are some of the things that come up. Whenever those issues come up and get raised to us, whenever possible, we direct those entities to a depackaging operation. There are cases where it doesn't work. There are certain materials or either packaging or food materials for which depackaging infrastructure is not effective. In those cases, we issue what's called a waste ban waiver. We have the authority to do this, allow it temporary disposal of a waste ban material that has no diversion alternative. I don't know off the top of my head how many of those we have, but Rob actually is our lead for those, and we could pull data about the number of waivers we've issued through the years. Intentional destruction that's not been clear to me that that's happening, but doesn't mean it's not. I just haven't been kind of specifically made aware of it. It also makes me think, I don't know if there's anyone from gleaning operations on the call today, but I know not so much destruction, but sometimes food in a farm environment is not picked because there's no place to sell it, no market to sell it to. And there are gleaning operations that work to harvest that food from farms and get it to, typically to those in need, to food, distribution channels. So just a couple of thoughts about that. Sorry, not a complete answer to your question. I don't have all the information, but those are some of the information that's come up for us along those lines.
I think my turn.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just two notes based on Phil's comments. Thank you, Phil. Increasing compost usage is not the same as increasing usage of food scrap compost. So if DOT is gonna or state's gonna buy more compost, like you might want to specify that they're buying a food waste compost, because just specifying that it's a compost could actually be bad for food waste composters, because we're in competition with them for space, for the carbon, the yard debris. And so that may be something to consider when you do, require buybacks, require food waste compost. And there are a couple of mechanisms for that, or to specify that. The other is about space for compost sites. So it's true, it is tricky to find compost sites. It's not, or places to put new ones. It's not impossible. But I think, so we're kind of pigeonholed to municipal sites because because of local zoning, right? Like we can't compete for commercial and industrial space very well, because then we're competing against a warehouse, that can do a lot more dollars per square foot than a compost site can. And then we can't really be in like an RA zone, a residential agricultural zone, even if there's no housing nearby. Like a lot of the state where there are possible sites are in RA zones, but composting is not agriculture. So if the legislature added that to the definition of agriculture, add composting, then that could alleviate that. And then, maybe DEP could have some more discretion on, like, if you are putting a site in an RA zone, we need to look at it a little harder or something, because it is possible. And like, I know you have the MDR agricultural permit, but functionally it's not usable, because they require you to actually be a farm. So when you're starting a new site, you can't just spin up an entire farm and then spin up a compost operation at the same time. So the MDR permit is not usable for new facilities to try to go in like that RA zone. So I think if you could open up the RA zones somehow, that would help, open up more spaces.
Maybe we can do Kirsty's comment, and then I'm going to try to jump to the next section after that to kind of make sure I cover everything I need to.
Thanks, John. And I'll be really quick. Thank you all for doing this. Great to hear, Andrew's excellent comments just now, and Phil's also. Couple things. One, I know that the DEP is coming out with new rules for the disposal and land of application of sludge because of the PFAS from there. The facility that I believe Phil was referring to in Central Mass, where there was high levels of PFAS, that was a sludge problem. There was some paper material there too, but it was sludge primarily that caused the PFAS, it looks like. So we want to make sure that we decrease the amount of sludge and in the processing as well as in that last step. How much of the capacity that we're talking about, that we're using now and that we're talking about in the future, is going to Greater Lawrence? Do you know, John?
Um, I have that number. I don't have it right in front of me or in my slides, but happy to follow up with that in the meeting notes. I just don't know, don't recall off the top of my head, and I don't want to guess at a number
No,
and be
that's
inaccurate.
fine. My point, of course, as always, is that it's concerning if we're putting all our eggs in that sludge PFAS basket, right? We don't want to do that because we need to be investing in exactly the type of stuff that Andrew and Phil are talking about, real composting, which can be AD on farms, but it can't be mixing it with a toxic material. I think you're going to run afoul of your own regs that are coming out pretty soon. And then the other thing I would say, and this is to Phil's point also, is I would love to know, and again, it can be a follow-up, how much is going through, and again, this isn't the final, but how much is going through the depackaging process? Because again, Phil's point about stickers is a great one, but we have a larger plastic processing problem that we've seen, for instance, in the Casella Run, Vermont, depackaging, where the farmers don't want the food because they'll be filling their pigs chock full of plastic. So that would be a great follow-up to know too, John, just as far as where the numbers are in Massachusetts. And
Yeah,
again, everybody, great work on this stuff.
I can just say, Kirsty, qualitatively, there's some overlap between those two things because one of those operations is the waste management core facility that's sending to the Greater Lawrence Sanitary District. So there will be some overlap between those two numbers. But yeah, we have that data. I just don't have it right at my fingertips, but happy to include that in our meeting summary. Okay. Oh, and I just saw Alex Pagani from Casella, saw your comment, Alex. We're happy to follow up on that contract that was relative to the use of the state contract for compost, and there's definitely a growing interest in this at the secretariat level and at the level of the climate chief. So. Happy to follow up with that and with some of the, agencies that may be likely purchasers off of that contract that's building on, responding to Phil's comment as well. So happy to have some more conversations on that aspect of compost usage. But with that, I'm going to try to switch gears a little bit. I will say that, if anyone has questions about any of this information or comments on it, either immediately following the meeting, or if you look at it afterwards and you have questions or comments, would be happy to have more offline conversations about that as well. So always happy to have that additional conversations following the meeting here, because inevitably we if we're successful at generating a lot of discussion and Q&A, we probably won't get to every single comment and question from everyone. We'll do our best. Okay, so shifting gears, all of that information I went through, and there's more, but all of that information kind of lays a context for where we are now, and a context for maybe where we need to think about going forward. And just to kind of float a number as a reminder, two numbers, our food waste capture as of 2024 was 350,000 tons. Our goal for 2030 is 780,000 tons. So two numbers to keep in mind as we think about where we go from here. So an important point that I haven't mentioned yet, but is really, really critical to all this work, is that solid waste disposal capacity in Massachusetts and throughout the Northeast US is severely limited. We do dispose of a lot of our waste out of state long distances via rail haul. Not a great outcome for a number of reasons, and we really want to cut into that and reduce that and be more self-sufficient in managing our waste material. And the best way we can do that is by reducing the amount of material that goes for disposal. And one of the best opportunities there, of course, is food material. Like you saw in my slide earlier, food waste diversion progress has leveled off a little bit over the past couple of years. And something that came up a little bit, I think it was Marie's question and my response, we do feel like while there's a lot of good compliance out there, there is still a need for more effective enforcement compliance right around the 1.5 ton per week threshold. There is a built-in conservative nature to our inspections and enforcement. When we do enforcement, we need to be confident that the load we're enforcing again has a 1/2 ton or more per week of food material. And when you look at food material in a load of trash, we're doing a volume-based observation that food material is often shrunk in a load of trash from the point it was placed in there to the point it's collected and tipped. Some of that food material may be in bags. So there's just a little built-in conservative nature. And when we're enforcing the 1/2 ton per week threshold, in reality, we're enforcing a little bit above that threshold due to these aspects of our inspection observations, and that's just the nature of the beast. We do have some additional available capacity within our infrastructure. We certainly have both a need and an opportunity to divert more material and reduce more material. And we also want to spur continued capacity growth going forward. Earlier this year, we issued an updated study. We did an initial economic benefit study back in 2016. We updated it in 2025, and that showed really significant benefits from an economic and job creation perspective associated with composting, anaerobic digestion, food waste hauling, and food donation and rescue. So this isn't just about environmental benefits. There are economic benefit aspects here to this. That's inclusive of many of the entities on the call here today. And then we really want to look, circling back to my very first slide, we really want to look at encouraging more food donation and rescue. We have a really big problem as a state with food insecurity. That problem is expected to grow and not shrink. And we have a lot of food material that gets discarded that's perfectly good to feed to people, perfectly safe to feed to people. And we collectively want to do a better job of capturing that material, and building around the leverage of the ban can be a really good way to do that. So there's been a lot of great work in that area, but we certainly think there's room for more. And for multiple reasons, this could be one of the best ways we can use our surplus food materials. So we want to make sure we're focused on the donation and rescue opportunities. So those are some of the things, kind of the points that I'm teasing out of this first set of slides that I think lay the context for where we want to go from here. I'm going to go through one other slide here, and just these two brief slides are going to be my transition to where we go from here. So I'm going to take another pause after this for other questions and thoughts here before we kind of dive into what I'm really excited to talk about. So this is a slide that I shared back at our organic subcommittee meeting in April. I might have made a minor wording change or two here, but this is essentially the same points that we had in mind back then. We continue to be mindful of now as we think about moving forward here. We need to keep in mind about what's happening through voluntary programs leading up to our original food waste ban. We made a lot of progress through voluntary approaches that really laid the groundwork for a successful ban implementation in 2014. We partnered with organizations like the Massachusetts Food Association and really developed a really solid foundation for moving forward with waste ban. And that work is continuing to happen as we look to build a collection infrastructure from smaller sources. So it's kind of a similar dynamic as we're in leading up to the 2014 ban. We really need to be mindful of cost effectiveness of collection from smaller sources. We did start with larger sources first because collection from larger sources does tend to be more cost effective on balance. So as we think about collecting more material from smaller sources, we really need to be doing all we can to maximize program cost effectiveness. Certainly, waste prevention and donation and rescue are excellent ways to do that. But other ways are really building out this more distributed infrastructure that has more locations where material can be brought closer to the point of generation with shorter haul distances and more robust collection infrastructure beyond what we have now. So those dynamics are going to be critical as we move forward. We need to think about the ability of our infrastructure to manage these additional materials. That's in part a function of the statewide capacity, but it's also a function of the distribution of that capacity. I think everyone's aware, we talked a little bit about the dynamics of siting compost operations. It's challenging. It's especially challenging in more densely populated areas. So we need to really, as always, when we think about a waste disposal ban, we need to think about the ability of our infrastructure to manage the material. We need to think about potential increased contamination as we look to collect more material from more smaller sources, and how do we manage that effectively and minimize it. And then, of course, if we're talking about a food waste disposal ban, we need to think about our ability to inspect and enforce effectively, and really make the ban effective in practice. So these are some of the criteria that we're thinking about as we think about, how do we move forward from here? How can we capture and divert more material from smaller sources, and how does a ban play into that? So this is all to lay the groundwork for our next steps and the initial proposal that I'm going to be sharing in a few moments. But again, I want to take a moment to pause, see if there's questions, comments about these last couple slides here before I move forward.
There's nothing in the questions or chat. So if anyone does have questions, feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself.
All good?
Yeah, nothing. All set to keep going, John.
Hopefully I made people curious. All right, so what I'm going to be going through next, and again, like I mentioned for these first two sections, I want to go all the way through it to kind of share the full context of what we're talking about, because as always, this needs to be taken as a whole. We need to be thinking about comprehensive approach. So you're probably going to have questions as I go. But I'm just going to ask folks to hold on to those. I want to get kind of all the way through this set of slides and make sure I've kind of covered everything from our perspective, and then we'll open it up to the questions, comments, and discussion. And the other thing I'll say here is that you'll see a lot of qualifying words in this slide alone. This is a potential proposed approach for discussion. I really want to emphasize those words. We are not moving forward with a specific approach right now, but we feel it's really important to share a proposed approach with stakeholders. And I think it's on us to float this proposal and give everyone something to react to, and kind of stimulate the discussion about where we go from here. So with all those caveats, we got a long way to go, miles to go before we sleep. I'll dive into things here. So what I'm going to be talking about here is a potential two-stage expansion to the food waste disposal ban. And I'll be kind of explain the two stages, and then I'll take a few minutes to explain my thinking behind that. So stage one, and these dates are kind of no sooner than dates. So there's no way any of this would happen any sooner than these dates. Quite likely would happen later than these dates. But just to kind of put some parameters around this, I've floated potential dates. So this first stage, what I'm proposing here is that we would lower the commercial organic span threshold to 0. I'll talk about why 0 in a moment. Not residential, but commercial food material. Likely, what I would propose is to write in some sort of exemption for businesses with what I could consider kind of incidental food waste. So they're not really food businesses. Could be an office with lunchroom waste. It could be a medical office building, a hardware store. All these entities that may have a little bit of food material in their trash, but they're really not food businesses. That's really not what we're looking at, and we would not expect businesses like that to set up food waste collection programs to comply with this food waste ban. So whatever businesses you want to lump in that category, that in itself is a matter of discussion. But just kind of qualitatively, those types of businesses, my intent would be that's not what we're talking about here with a disposal ban. This would very likely include all public schools, assuming they have some type of cafeteria. So anyone where someone's going to school for the full day, likely would be subject to the food waste ban, and likely would need to take some kind of steps to reduce their food waste to comply with the ban. So this is really significant, and creates a big program need that we really need to focus on if we were to be able to make this work. Then we're talking about a potential second stage expansion, again, no sooner than November 1st, 2030, quite possibly later than that. And the November date, by the way, is on purpose. Whether it's November 1st exactly isn't really important, but I do think late fall is a good time for a ban to go into effect. I think early in the summer is a bad time for a ban to go into effect. I think for anyone that's operating on an academic year, having a ban effective date after the start of an academic year makes sense. So the November 1st date's not by accident, and it does happen to align with our prior effective year dates. But again, the actual date very much subject to change, as well as this whole proposal. But the idea, would be to expand the ban at that point to include residential food waste. An important part of that, if anyone has been around for a long time in Massachusetts, you remember way back when we had a program called the Department Approved Recycling Program or Department Approved Composting Program. We ended that program, but we're talking about maybe renewing something along those lines for food material, recognizing that it's really not viable to expect all municipalities to collect all food material from all residents. Just not going to work. So what we're looking to do is lay out a program standard where municipalities that meet a specific program standard, which they could provide documentation to us if they choose, would be considered essentially compliant with food waste disposal ban. So even if we saw a load of trash with food material coming from that municipality, that would not necessarily be subject to enforcement. It might be subject to some communication and talk about, hey, how's your program going? What's the implementation status? What's happening next? What's the implementation like? Things like that. We might ask questions, but in that kind of scenario, we would not implement enforcement against a municipal entity like that. And that could include, potentially it would likely be some form of menu for different program options. Likely part of this would be like a percentage of households served element to it. And likely would vary for curbside drop-off trash communities. And presumably this is something that we'd increase periodically over time. So we've not talked about, exactly what that criterion might look like, but I think that's a really important element that we're thinking about as we think about how would we apply this at the municipal level. Here's one moment. Okay. So 2 potential proposed stages of an expanded food waste disposal ban for discussion. I'll talk a little bit about the reality of this and how it works. I'm going to circle back to some of how we do waste ban enforcement and what waste bans really mean in practice, because I think it's really important to understand this, to understand how a ban like this would work. Okay, so I mentioned some of this already, but it's worth repeating. So MassDEP conducts inspections at solid waste facilities. We monitor loads of trash. We document what we see. We take pictures. We take notes. We trace individual loads back to their source. Food material right now is the only material that has a threshold. So everything else in our waste ban regulations, it just says you can't dispose of cardboard, you can't dispose of bottles and cans. There's no allowable disposal amount for other waste ban materials in the regulations. However, there are these action levels. And action levels are really set within a solid waste facility guidance document. They're intended primarily for solid waste facility implementation of waste bans. But there are kind of two categories of action levels. Something like a mattress, large, bulky, easy to observe. That's what we call a quote zero tolerance material. A mattress and a load is technically makes that load a failed load. Whether or not we issue enforcement is another question, but it's failed load. With material like cardboard, bottles and cans, paper, leaves and yard waste, certain construction materials, we look at volume-based action levels. So for example, cardboard is that action level is 10% by volume. MassDEP is not bound to those action levels because, like I mentioned, the waste ban regulations say there's no allowable disposal amount, but to make our enforcement meaningful, to make our enforcement effective, beneficial, efficient, we consider the amount of waste ban material in a load when we take enforcement action. And we generally don't take enforcement action every time we see a water bottle, every time we see a cardboard box, because we would be doing waste ban enforcement for every single load. It would lose all meaning, everything would grind to a halt, and we'd accomplish nothing. So the same would hold true for something like this. So say you had no threshold for a food waste disposal ban, that would operate in kind of a similar manner as our waste bans operate now for cardboard, paper, leaves and yard waste, bottles and cans, construction material. So it doesn't mean every time we see a banana peel in a load of trash under a zero threshold, we would not be issuing enforcement in that type of scenario. We'd be still issuing enforcement for significant quantities. But I think what's important is that we would not necessarily need to know the exact amount of food material coming from a specific generator to issue enforcement against that generator. Same thing with cardboard. I don't have to know exactly how many cardboard boxes or exactly how many pounds or tons of cardboard boxes are in a load from an entity to take enforcement. I just need to know that they disposed of that material, and that's my enforcement standard. So the same dynamics would hold true if we were to have a food waste disposal ban with a zero threshold. So just like our other waste ban materials, we'd be looking at issue enforcement for significant amounts of the ban material, in this case, food material. As with other materials, we are never talking about enforcement against individuals, and we're not talking about enforcement for minimal, kind of de minimis quantities of food material in a load of trash. We're looking, same thing we're doing now, we're looking to enforce against entities that dispose of significant amounts of food material, but having a zero threshold would really allow us to enforce the current ban more effectively, because we would not have to document a specific amount from a specific entity to take enforcement. I think that's key difference between a zero waste ban threshold and what we operate now, the half-ton per week threshold we operate now. So this is really important context as you think about the reality of what this means, because I think anytime you use the word zero, that requires explanation in a waste ban context. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of these next slides a little more quickly. They're really important, but again, this meeting's a lot about engagement, discussion, Q&A, so I want to make sure that I get through this quickly. But these supporting programs are critical, because what we're proposing here is not just a potential waste ban change, it's ensuring that all the programs that we operate are designed, sized, implemented in a way that ensures that implementation of any change to the waistband would be successful. And that's what we always strive for. So we have our Recycling Business Development Grant Program. This is a capital grant program. It's for both facilities that receive material as well as facilities collect material. This picture's from Tommy's Compost Service, one of our grantees for collection equipment, particularly that truck. In the past, we've issued recycling business development grants up to $400,000 for processing, up to $100,000 for collection equipment. We're getting ready to finalize our next application of the recycling business development grants. And among other things, we're considering larger grants for food materials, potentially above that 400,000 threshold. Again, recognizing, circling back to my capacity slides at the beginning, while we have some excess capacity, we know that to make any reduced waistband threshold effective, we know we're going to need more capacity, and we know we as a state need to invest in that capacity. We also have a recycling loan fund. It's been around since 1994. This is a revolving loan fund. This is open for applications at any time. This covers, again, both collection and processing. It's more flexible than recycling business development grants. It can be used for really any legitimate business purpose. Those loans can go up to $500,000 for most materials. We do the ability to go up to $1.5 million for loans for anaerobic digestion. So that recycling loan fund continues to be available. The revolving loan fund, I think we've awarded, it's probably even more than this now, but something like 4 times the original loan fund balance, like 4 times over, because principal payments go back into the fund. If we ever got to the point where the principal balance of the loan fund was low, we can look at investing additional money to ensure the fund remains solvent and able to meet demand for loans. So that's something where if we need to, we can put additional money into the loan fund to ensure adequate capital. Our Recycling Works in Massachusetts program, again, that program does a lot. Among other things, they deliver compost site technical assistance, but also, of course, assistance to businesses that generate food materials, really a whole suite of assistance to support businesses that are looking to reduce food waste. Our Waste Reduction Innovations Grant, we did accept proposals for startup and pilot projects for food waste. And the cycle that we just, the application cycle that just closed recently, we're going through an review and evaluation process now, trying to get initial award notifications this fall. We are looking to consider food material as a target material for larger capital projects in the next grant cycle for the innovations grant, depending on how this cycle goes, depending on how the next RBDG grant cycle goes. So all of these programs have potential for increased MassDEP investment to potentially increase the number of grants and loans, and also potentially the size of the grants. Recycling Works in Massachusetts, again, quick review of this. Lots of web-based resources and guidance, best management practices. They can deliver assistance via email and phone. They can deliver on-site assistance where issues are more complex. The Recycling Works program does a lot of speaking at meetings, exhibiting in conferences, outreach through a mailing list of about 8,000 entities. If you're not on their email list and you're interested in these issues, you should definitely request to be added. There's a lot of useful information that comes out through that program. And, you know, once again, we invest really significantly in the Recycling Works program to ensure that we can meet all the need for business technical assistance statewide. We're going to really continue to try to hold to that commitment going forward. Okay, schools. So I alluded to schools a little bit earlier. Schools are often a complex and challenging environment to implement programs like this. At the same time, there's really a lot of interest in implementing programs like this in schools. And, you know, I mentioned our green team earlier. We both deliver education and curriculum programs through the green team. We have the ability to award smaller equipment grants through the green team. We do also deliver assistance to schools through our Recycling Works program. We use that as a program vehicle to deliver technical assistance to schools. We have a really robust and active, what we call a Green Sword work group at MassDEP, where we work with school organizations, help participate in this work group to share best practices, share lessons learned, and really help anyone who's working in a school environment implement programs as efficiently and effectively as possible. We're continuing to participate in and engage in that work group going forward. And then we're also looking at ramping up expanded equipment grants for schools that could support food waste diversion programs at schools, whether it be carts, collection containers, or other equipment. So that's something that we're looking at developing as we frame the next grant offering for our Sustainable Materials Recovery Program. Okay, Sustainable Materials Recovery Program grants. These are two main components to our SMRP grants. That includes our equipment grants, which include grants for food waste collection carts, as well as equipment for food waste drop-off programs that municipalities may want to implement, and then potentially organics capacity grants that could potentially fund larger capital projects that a city or town is interested in. So again, looking to continue to meet as much demand as possible through these grants, through our funding allocations. Really, again, a theme here, prioritizing investment in our food waste infrastructure as we look to think about where we're spending our program dollars and our program budget for waste reduction. This has been a top priority for many years, and any movement towards reduced waste ban threshold would really elevate food waste reduction as a program priority for our grant and assistance dollars, as well as our staffing work. And then the other component of the Sustainable Materials Recovery Program is a recycling dividends program. Through this program, municipalities earn points based on the programs they implement. And those points in turn qualify them for payments that they can then reinvest in approved program expenses. So through the Recycling Dividends Program in 2024, municipalities earned a little over $300,000 of program payments. That's roughly one-tenth of the overall program payments from implementing food waste related programs. And then over this 4-year period, municipalities spent nearly $900,000 of their Recycling Dividends Program funds on investing in these various food waste programs, whether it be drop-off programs, food waste carts for collection, potentially programs in schools, equipment for drop-off locations, about $900,000 of municipal expenses and investment that was supported by funding through the Recycling Dividends Program. Okay, so this is where I'm going to pause, but I think it's worth, I'm going to kind of circle back to this slide again at the end, but I think this slide is important to as kind of a framing slide before we dive back into questions and comments here. So, if you were to take one point away from this slide, it's that we're very early in this discussion. We have a long way to go. We have lots of consultation to go, lots of engagement to go, and we have lots of process to go if any of this is to become real and implemented. So, of course, we want to obtain feedback on our proposed approach. That's going to go well beyond the meeting here today. We really want to engage stakeholders to participate in this process, many of whom are here today, but not all of whom are here today. So we know we can't just rely on this one meeting for stakeholder engagement. We need to have more meetings of our organic subcommittee, but we also need to reach out beyond that and try to meet people where they're at. And that's something that, I'm personally committed to really going out and talking to people as much as possible. This is not something we're going to figure out in one meeting. So there's going to be some follow-up meetings as we go. We need to continue to revise, refine any proposal that we're going to move forward with. And we really need to make sure we have, take what I presented in the slides here and really frame that into an updated action plan that's going to ensure we have comprehensive strategy in place that's going to make this work. Once we've done all that, our waste disposal bans are regulations. So any change to our regulations needs to go through a public comment and hearing process. We need to issue draft regulations for public comment. Then we need to go out for public comment on those draft regulations. We need to hold public hearings. Then we need to take that back, consider all the comments we get, write a response to comments document, and then promulgate final regulations. And if there were a expanded commercial organics or overall food waste disposal ban, the effective date would be out in advance of the promulgation date of the regulations. So hopefully this gives you just a sense that there's a lot of steps here. The regulatory process alone is typically a 2-year process for us. So, you know, if you recall those dates, those 2028 and 2030 dates I mentioned, you know, likely, like I said, the earliest possible. These things could happen likely later. And then, of course, you know, when a ban does go into effect, there's a whole bunch of work to implement the ban, supporting programs, compliance assistance, outreach. So there's a lot that needs to happen here before any of this were to ever become real. So with that, I've given everyone a lot to think about. I know it's the first time everyone's seen all this. So you likely many of you have initial reactions. Likely many of you are going to think of reactions after the meeting here. And that's perfectly fine. We're going to be talking about this for some time. But with that, I'm going to pause here. And Rob, if you just want to kind of help me go through questions and comments here, and we'll work through those as best we can. And I'm happy to bounce back to slides if we need to.
Sure. So we had a question from Julia Green about school systems. If they have a central kitchen, would the central kitchen and the cafeterias be subject to the waste ban? And I think before we basically considered with the, you know, half-ton per week rule that they would be subject to the ban to disposing of over half a ton. And if the ban does change, then they all probably would be subject to the ban if they dispose of any kind of food waste. So I don't know if you had anything to add or.
Yes, I think that's, I would say I would agree with that. When we talk about the current ban and implementing the half-ton per week threshold, that half-ton threshold is determined on a per location basis, not for the school system as a whole. Any school location that was disposing of significant amounts of food material would potentially be subject to the ban. I think, though, that, you know, we need to think, all of us need to think about prioritizing the work in this area. So I think, you know, prioritizing where you can get most bang for your buck, where you can, you know, capture as much food material as possible. You know, like I've kind of alluded to, we don't ever expect to get down to zero. So I think for any entity that's either subject to the current ban or potentially subject to a future ban, the way to approach this is to try to figure out the most bang for your buck from a compliance and diversion perspective.
We have a couple hands up too, so we'll start with Mark and then we'll go to Phil.
Sure, thank you. So on one of the items, the stage 1 expansion, the considered exemption for businesses with incidental food waste, I would recommend against having any exceptions, primarily for the reason of that this could create some kind of perverse incentive for businesses to close their existing cafeterias and kind of leave the workers that were originally there and expecting to be able to get food at a cafeteria in the lurch. Or perhaps they would, rather than having an on-site cafeteria, they would have, you know, like a food truck come by, and then it would externalize a lot of that waste sort of elsewhere, rather than it, you know, actually being dealt with in a meaningful way. I think the other thing that needs to be definitely included in this is a lot of education around like what to do with food waste. I think like there's this nonprofit that I interviewed for a comprehensive climate action plan that we're working at the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission. That is a the Rhode Island school recycling program, and they've done a really interesting thing where they include they basically are, in order to get like these schools in compliance with their organics waste ban, they actually have the students right now at elementary schools, but soon it'll be middle and high schools, participate in the actual food sortate or waste sortation and separation process at the end of their time in the cafeteria. And so like incorporating an educational component, I think, into this organic waste ban will reduce, in the future, when we want to do the stage two, with including residential food waste, all of these students that will have started to learn how to separate that waste out in maybe in this initial stage one expansion is where I think to put this, would then be able to think, ah, yes, I remember this from my school days. I know exactly what needs to be sorted into our compost bin and what can't go in there. And so I think like in order to reduce sort of like for residential, small business, to ensure that they're not like there's not and to reduce contamination, that a large educational component I think will be necessary.
Yeah, thank you. I just completely agree on the comment about education relative to potential exemption. Just to clarify how that would likely work if we were to write something on that. It likely wouldn't be a formal exemption in the regulation, but for our current food waste disposal ban, we have a Q&A document about the ban on our website that kind of explains how we implement it. And whether we specifically say businesses like this are quote exempt or not, they likely would not have enough food material in their waste stream to trigger waste ban enforcement for food material from MassDEP. So we can think about how we, approach communication around that. But that was, kind of what I was trying to get at is that there are cases where a business it could hold true for other waste ban materials as well. They may have kind of incidental material in a specific category that technically is a waste ban material, but may not be kind of the type amount of material that we would potentially be issuing enforcement for. So that's just something to think about how maybe that gets communicated. And I think it is important to be careful about messaging and expectations involved with any such messaging. So definitely something we would have to think about some more, but just to kind of clarify some of the thinking behind that bullet there.
Phil?
Okay, I'm gonna throw a bunch of stuff like pragmatic stuff. And I put something in the chat and I want to draw people's attention to, and I would suggest, John, that you and your team up through the commissioner, I know, are aware that the Mass Ready Act has been passed, which is a bond bill, the environmental, well, it has not been passed. It's been proposed by the governor for several $billion, and in there was $28 million for DEP for solid waste initiatives. So I would really seriously look at how DEP would allocate some of that funding to this program. And if this is a big initiative coming down, which it is, and it's a large chunk of the waste stream that seems to be left for DEP to go after other than other things, that be reflected in the allocation of resources from the Ready Act, and really because of all the goals of Ready Act. So that's a funding source, and I know that you have to put in your request for the funding, and there's several of us that are probably going to come up and talk to you about that. So I want to get that on the table for everybody else to think about too, because we don't know what's going to happen with the federal government. They're cutting back all sorts of grant programs, that may have been out the Swiffer, and who knows what's going to happen at the federal level. And then those that were relying on federal grants now have to rely to the state. So, again, developers are being squeezed, So the other pragmatic some suggestion is that I think you really seriously need to reach out to other states that have implemented these kind of bans that are further down the avenue. And I would suggest reaching out to California, that has an AB, what do they call it, assembly bill, whatever, and they're in the midst of, California. I mean, you're talking a massive undertaking, And there's so many things that come up when it actually gets into the law that, you know, oh, I didn't think of that. I didn't think of this. As much as we'd like to make soil in highly urbanized areas, you know, getting it out of the city cost effectively without massive amounts of labor and fuel is going to be a challenge, and AD will play a role in some form or another because of that, because we just don't have the farming communities that we have in other parts of the country. So all the points made about quality compost are still there. And again, I stand by my comments earlier. We've lost 2/3 of the compost capacity for a reason. Why? And so to that end, I would encourage DP to form a working group with the developers and operators that some are on this call, much like you do with the MRF operators in the Smart program, where you actually sit down with them in great detail for hours and hours and hours and say, what is going to make your operation work? So when the Recycle Smart folks, Janice and everybody says to the MRF operators, what can you recycle? And then we'll put that on the do not recycle list or the do recycle. What do you want? All the MRF operators are in the same boat with the three. So now we have a compost smart program or whatever it is, but the operator is going to tell you, Andrew had some very specific comments about even zoning in competition. I think you really need to do a deep dive with those folks separately, independently on a working group. I'm talking, multiple times in the 2028 timeframe. It could take 3 years to find, locate, finance, permit, and build an operation, and you may find it maybe more like 5 years. You mentioned the regulations. I'm still waiting for the 310 CMR 19 updates from 4 years ago. I'm sorry to bring that up, but if this is going to be added to those, that's going to delay that package, still another, I don't know, couple of years, unless you're going to go and implement those sooner and then, reboot for another round. Because I know you have to go through a process, but literally we've been waiting 3.5, 4 years for the draft ones for 310 CMR 16 and 19. So the other is the capacity. I think you really need to match the capacity you have now with the capacity that would be needed to meet these goals that you're proposing, stage 1 and stage 2, and back out where not only regionally, but seasonally, like on the Cape here, where that flow would go, and actually, do some tabletop exercise and, simulations of where routes would be. And again, the haulers and the processors could give you information about what it takes to get this stuff done. We use the program down here, but in the summer they're up at 3 a.m. driving trucks around. It's crazy. They do a fantastic job. But you need to look. It's not just a spreadsheet. It's linear. It's seasonal. It's regional, and all that capacity is not just a simple. You need to really back into the numbers with real facilities, with real capacity. And the business community, I don't know if they know recycling works well, but I would suggest reaching out to the chambers of commerce, Associated Industries of Massachusetts, the food retailers, the food restaurateurs, all these associations, and really promote the heck out of that, because I don't know that they're aware of it. All that would be part of the plan. And the last general comment is there was a lot of discussion about bans, and that's important, and waste bans, but I really need to see a lot more on, again, capacity building, capacity, supporting capacity in a real granular level, because it's very tempting to, kind of hit the waistband goal trigger, if you will, and hope it comes. But, there's a lot. That's why I say reach out to states like California that, there's a lot that goes on after you pass something to actually get it to happen in the real world. And the municipalities are struggling financially. They have an incentive now because they're shipping further out of state, as you know, down to Alabama in some cases. So the costs are going up, and that does create a local incentive. So those are more comments I have. I hope that helps you, but I really think you need to have some offline discussions with the other folks on this call that are going to build the capacity you want and go really deep dive on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Just responding to one part of that, my expectation is that this would be not part of our forthcoming solid waste regulation revisions that we've been working on that you referenced for two reasons. One, like you mentioned, that has been an embarrassingly long time frame, and we don't want to do anything to extend it further. And second, you know, like you also kind of referred to, and I agree with, there's more work that needs to be done before we can really proceed with the ban. And I would just, you know, maybe it was even a mistake to put those dates in these slides, but I just kind of wanted to float how it might work. I would really encourage people not to get too caught up in those dates at this stage, because we do realize more time is needed, and likely, given the time required for all of these stages, likely would end up being a little bit later. But anyway, just wanted to acknowledge the part about the regulation approach. This would be a separate regulation package.
We have Andrew with his hand up, and then after that, John from Second Chance Composting.
Thank you. This pathway is great. We've always said that MassDEP has been doing it right, and you know that's been shown in you know, news press releases talking about how, you know, Massachusetts is doing it the best. And I would say the nation's watching. They want to see what's happening here. So I think we have a big impact, and I applaud your guys' effort. I want to respectfully disagree with Phil. I think anaerobic digestion is not the only way to get food waste out of the city. You can come up to our Manchester facility and we can show you how to do it. And kind of along those lines, I'd like to see some component in the new regulations and the new waste bans that prevent the single streaming of food waste, right? It's with depackagers as an option at digestion facilities, but we don't do it at compost sites. There's a lot of incentive with the haulers to tell restaurants, et cetera, like, oh yeah, put the plastic in, it's no problem, right? And you know that, you know, we'll sort it out later, and that may work with recycling, you know, and single stream MRFs, but for organics, you know, that's a mistake because we're dealing with our food supply, and we can't have that kind of contamination in there. So, you know, maybe there needs to be some enforcement angle at these facilities where if there's too much plastic coming in with the food waste, then that's an issue. Because once we start mixing plastic and allowing generators to be lazy, it's going to be hard to go backwards. So it needs to be SSO, not SSO plus plastic.
Thank you, Andrew. I think was John. I think not. John was next.
Yeah, John.
Thank you. Just a question, how this relates to current haulers of MSW. Would there be, from people picking up privately from residents, even commercially? How would it work on that end? Are you going to make some regulation where they have to have it separated, kind of like they do with recycling things? And just any deeper information about that would be helpful.
Yeah, that's a good question, John, and I don't fully know the answer to that. I know that's a very targeted or very complex and difficult segment for recycling also. There's a lot of recycling access issues among residents served by private haulers, and that would, you know, certainly be the case for food material as well. So it's a good question, an issue that would definitely require some work. I do think there's potential for programs like municipal drop-off programs or community-based compost bins, things like that, to serve communities where, you know, residents or communities where, you know, curbside collection may not make sense, may not be economically feasible, things like that. But definitely a good issue to raise, and definitely, you know, I think an important part of the population to think about if we were to go down to include residents. So appreciate the comment.
My thinking is that they're already hauling the material, they're just not separating it. So they're already in place. They're already going to these places. They're getting the material, just need to be separated. So I'm not sure how Vermont does it. I think they have some sort of ban or requirement for the haulers to have that done. The infrastructure is already in place, so if there was some way to do it that made sense and we could keep the contamination out, I think that makes a lot of sense. It would make the more haulers available for food scraps, that type of thing.
Who's next here? I think Steve Bandera.
Yeah, Steve's next, then Michael.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Steve Bandera, project manager for Recycling Works in Massachusetts, and happy to be here. And so first I want to agree with Andrew in that Massachusetts is definitely a leader in this field. For us, it's evidenced by a number of press that has been happening recently about organics diversion here, as well as inquiries that we have been getting from states around the country, wondering about what we're doing that's so good, that's working. You know, kudos to John and team for leading the way. And this plan really does seem like the next logical step, the next progression for where we need to go. Do we have capacity challenges that we're going to need to work on? Yes, but this definitely seems like the logical next step. And then just a couple notes for some things that I've heard mentioned. You know, working with schools, as John mentioned, the Green Team and Recycling Works does work with schools to help teach students about sorting, and they have sort tables and they help students how to sort out their organics when their meal is over. And Recycling Works does a significant amount of outreach to businesses and institutions in the state, and that does include chambers of commerce's, the Mass Restaurant Association, and AIM as well. So we are very tapped in and are frequently reaching out to businesses and organizations, business organizations, as well as individual places. And then finally, we also hold an annual hauler roundtable, which is confidential, not confidential. It's a more confidential space for haulers from the region, not just Massachusetts, to get together to talk about some of the issues that they're facing. We usually have a couple key topics so that haulers can sort of work out some of those problems, and that has been a really robust discussion in the last couple of years. Yeah, well, that's it. That's just a couple words from Recycling Works. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. It just prompts two other thoughts from my perspective. One is that we've been doing a similar roundtable each year with food recovery organizations, food donation and rescue organizations, and I tie Recycling Works into that. And we just have an informal call and we just, you know, kind of talk about what's working, what's not working, what should we be doing differently. So I think this circles back to Phil's comment as well. You know, I'm always happy to, you know, get a group of composting operators together, or whoever it might be, food waste haulers, and have similar conversations. So I think that's, you know, important to be mindful of those opportunities to connect with people and give everyone a voice and make sure we kind of understand the reality of what's going on out there is super important. And the other thing I just want to acknowledge, and you know, I'm sure I'll say this again through the process, but I really appreciate that most of you on the call today have lots of other things you're focused on. If you're a municipal official, you are focused on other programs. This is just one of many issues you think about. If you're a business or association, a chamber, you're focused on, you know, dozens of issues affecting the business community. And this is, you know, only one of many issues that you're thinking about. So I'm very cognizant of that. I think it's important for us to remember that as we do outreach, that this may be our top priority, but it's probably not the top priority of everybody we're talking to. So I just want to kind of acknowledge that reality. And I think we need to be mindful of that, and we need to, realize that, the first time we contact somebody about something and about an issue doesn't mean that we've accomplished our outreach goal. So I'm very aware of that. Mike?
Hey, John. Thank you for this presentation. Very exciting to see some potential dates on the board. That is a huge step forward for DEP, so congrats and thank you. I just wanted to kind of offer some of our kind of thoughts / insights maybe, or a couple of things that we've been seeing here in Cambridge. We've got a 10-year-old program now, and we, started out with BioBag, providing compostable bags for our community, and we always kind of envisioned that these would become very mainstream and costs would start coming down. And one of the things that's been hard for us to grapple with is just the reality of, having programs like this and trying to do it in a cost-effective way for businesses that may not be environmentally leaning or residents that may not be environmentally inclined to do this. One of the things that we keep struggling with is like trying to get that next wave of people to consider to separate their food waste from the trash. And one of the things that we find very, very helpful is like trying to figure out like how to help them do it in a cost-effective manner. We offer a business compost program where the city collects twice a week for free from businesses. And even at that point, we still are kind of pulling people into the program, trying really hard, even though there's a pretty strong financial incentive for them to do it. It's just the ability to do it. And so, I fully recognize, some talk of, plastic bags being used in collection and things of that sort. And one of the hardest things for us to grapple with is just, and, more municipalities are dealing with this than just us, is just the cost of trying to maintain a program and, trying to put down a program that you say is mandatory. We're not there yet here in Cambridge, and DEP is not there yet totally, but having a mandate and trying to do it in an affordable way is a really, really tough thing, especially as you look at the price for one 48-gallon compostable bag at $1 a piece versus pennies for a plastic bag. It's just really hard to move the needle without having the depackagers. And so it's just something we struggle with a lot. Large buildings for sure, huge roadblock as well. Businesses, and we had some conversations with Boulder and a couple other communities where they've just kind of given up on front of the house composting because it's just gotten so bad and dirty, even in cities like Boulder where they're just so progressive and have been at the forefront, but even there they've just thrown their hands up. Part of it is because they mostly use compost sites that don't have ability to clean up contamination. So it's just a really complex topic overall. But really excited that there's talk about moving it forward, and hopefully this kind of helps start the conversation in other communities.
Thanks, Mike. I just want to, I've been trying to kind of glance at some of the comments coming in the chat here as well, and I just wanted to touch on a couple things. Kendall Christensen wrote several comments back here. Even the best residential green bin / food waste programs capture significantly less than 100% of what's generated, like recycling. 50% captures more likely, unfortunately. And particularly in the residential environments, that's definitely the case. And we know that. That's a consideration of how we implement waste disposal bans now. When we look at residential loads, we know there's not going to be 100% capture of recyclables, and there's going to be some amount of material that still winds up in the trash, even with, like Mike said, even with really extensive municipal programs. We know the reality is not getting to 100%, and that's where it's important to be mindful that when we do waste ban inspections and we see loads that get our attention, we give a lot of thought to when we issue enforcement action. And that's a really, we have guidance that we use for our existing waistband inspections and enforcement. And the same would hold true under a reduced food waistband threshold. We'd continue to think very carefully about where enforcement is appropriate, recognizing just the reality of some of the issues that folks have been raising here. It looked like, I think Andrew.
Hey, I just want to respond to Michael's comment. I'd say there's tides at the national level to address microplastics. And like in Europe, there's some countries that have switched to compostable bags. And, you know, that may be coming in, you know, our nation's future to address the microplastics issue and lost plastics. So I'd be careful relying on plastic bags. I'd also be careful relying on the Boulder experience because they did a very poor rollout. They went full ban without any kind of education, and they ended up with you know, a lot of contamination. So it's like the polar opposite to what MassDEP has done, and it's like what not to do. So I'd be careful trying to you know, peg my hat on too many lessons learned out of Boulder. Besides, don't go 0 to 60.
Okay. That comment about legislation, I just wanted to raise something, and I didn't put this in my slides, but there's some important legislative initiatives going on, a little you know, bigger than MassDEP, but definitely touching on this issue. One is both national and state level legislation on food date labeling laws and trying to clarify food date labeling, which really ties into reducing and preventing wasted food at the source. And then there's also legislation around increased incentives for business and breaking down barriers for business food donation. And I know I was at this Northeast Recycling conference yesterday, and Liz Miller from Spoonful spoke to this. So I might put someone on the spot here, and if that's not okay, don't, you know, you just ignore me. But either Joni from Spoonfuls, or maybe I think there are a couple of folks on from you know, the Matt's Food Systems program. Would anyone sort of be up for kind of speaking off the cuff about some of the legislative initiatives that are out there related to food waste prevention and reduction? It might be just a kind of important contextual point if anyone's willing to jump in spontaneously about that.
John, I can actually drop into the chat some of our advocacy resources that have some good, just high level summaries of the latest there. So I'll look those up and just drop those into the chat.
Okay, that'd be great, and we can share that out with the meeting summary. I think it's just circling back to some of the comments I made earlier. You know, everything that we can do to prevent and reduce wasted food at the source, everything that we can do to capture good food and deliver it to feed people, reduces the amount of you know, food, quote, food waste that we need to be collecting and delivering to facilities. So I think I don't want to lose track of that, and I want to, you know, stay aware of kind of the leverage points that are out there to really support that and make it happen. So yeah, thank you, Joni. That would be great, and we can share that out in a meeting summary that we share.
We had one last question, I think, John. What number does DEP use to estimate the pounds of food waste per household per week on average? You know that?
I don't know that we don't have a specific estimate for that, or we don't have like a standard estimate for that. So I don't know off the top of my head. I know there's program data out there from our municipalities about how much they're collecting. I don't know if either someone from a municipal program perspective or maybe Andrew or John Petroff, if you guys have insight into that from your perspective about what you get from residential collections? Okay, Andrew, okay, roughly 500 pounds per year. Would that be per household or? Okay, 500 pounds per year per household, got it. Or 11 pounds a week, 2.5 gallons per week. Okay, so those different units, a couple of different ways of looking at it, but hopefully that gives you some idea what that might look like. And I see that Joni put the link she mentioned to the chat here, and we'll prepare some meeting notes and share. We'll share a bunch of things. We'll share some of the comments and discussion here, but we'll also share some of the the information that's been shared in the meeting. We are nearing the end of our time here, so I want to. We don't have to. Oops, sorry. Try that again. We don't have to stop immediately at 3 o'clock, but I also don't want to keep people too much longer. Gotta restart my sharing, huh? Can you see?
Your next step slide is back up.
Yeah. Can you see it now? Okay.
What was that, John?
You can see it now. Okay. The
Yeah,
next steps.
good.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. So yeah, so we're at about 3 o'clock here, and I'm happy to stick around a few minutes longer, but I want to kind of bring things to a close for today. I really appreciate people's comments and questions here today. I will bounce to the next slide in a moment to share my email address here. I would welcome any more comments or questions that folks have that you want to share with me. Please contact me directly, and I'll get those and give them some thought and put them together. There were some ideas today about additional outreach channels and meetings. Our mantra about this the first time around is that we'd go speak to anybody, anytime about the proposals we're working on, and within the limits of human endurance, that holds true again. So anyone who's got a group who has issues, questions, concerns about this, if you want us to try to reach out, talk more about what's happened so far, what we're thinking about, hear what you're thinking about that, we're open to doing that, and welcome that. That's all a benefit to us. So it's a great use of our time to hear from anyone who has thoughts about this. We will be taking the thoughts we get here today and in the wake of this meeting and preparing kind of some follow-up thoughts and consideration. We do have some things we need to think about that we heard here today, and we'll be kind of developing a second round of what we've thought about here, given some of the things we've heard here today. That's kind of the fourth bullet here: developing a refined proposal, and then start to think about what the action plan would need to look like to support everything we're talking about here. All these critical supporting programs that need to be in place and get implemented to make any of this a possible reality. And everything, kind of the lower bullets on this slide, are future things that we're not even working on right now. We're all up kind of on the first 4 bullets on the slide here. This is my email address. I always have it, have a phone conversation with people, have a Teams call, have a Zoom call, but email is always the best way to reach me in this day and age. I'm pretty responsive on email, and always happy to use it as a conduit to further conversation. You know, as I mentioned at the beginning, we did record the meeting here today. I will be sharing my slides up on our organic subcommittee webpage, along with a meeting recording and along with some, not complete notes, because we rely on sharing the slides and the summary, but some of the points of information that we can share, we'll share out as well. I will share all of that. Once it's posted, I'll share the link to all that information with our organic subcommittee email list. If you or your colleagues are not on that list and would like to be, please contact me and I will add you. So either for any of you, probably most of you are on the list, but if you're not, or if you have colleagues who you'd like to be added, please let me know. I'd also encourage anyone who's not on the Recycling Works Massachusetts email list to request to be added to that. A lot of outreach about a lot of program work going on here goes on through the Recycling Works email distribution list, and that's a great way to keep in touch with other aspects of our work that may not come out directly from MassDEP. So that's what I've got. I thought I saw something pop up on the chat, Rob. Any final comments to take here?
I don't think anything to take care of. There's a few just comments just thanking us for the meeting and whatnot. Doesn't look like any new questions or anything that needs to be addressed.
Okay. Well, so I'll kind of close where I started. I really appreciate everybody's time. I know everybody's busy. You have programs to run, businesses to run, agendas to keep up with. So I appreciate folks taking the time to join us here today. I know it's a commitment. I hope it was useful for you. I know it's been a valuable meeting for us. Appreciate the comments, the input. We're just getting started. So stay in the loop, and we'll keep the discussion going, and we'll be sharing more information about next steps and further discussions with everyone shortly. So thanks again. Hope everyone enjoys the lovely sunny fall afternoon, and look forward to speaking with you all again soon. Thanks again.